What I'm talking about today is when there's two parts of us that feel like they are in conflict with each other, that they either try to override each other or just get in the way, so what we want to happen doesn't get to happen. And as I often do on this channel, I'm going to share my personal experience in this case, and sometimes I share client experiences, but real life stuff that, we all deal with. And the more conscious we are, the more aware we are. And awareness is a beautiful gift, but it can also show us something that is in our way. And it can show us so clearly that if we don't tend to it, it can have us stuck. So, this challenge that I'm referring to, that I've had for many years, is what feels like a battle between this inner self, and I'm going to use the term like a wild child, right? Or the inner child being like a wild child, right? Wants to play, wants to enjoy, has like ideas, sparks, and then wants to rest suddenly. Like it's not predictable. And then there's this other side, and I'll call it like more like an elegant adult, right? That also loves structure, that loves knowing what's going to happen, that loves the idea of planning things and having things work, and very much like in the mind in terms of like imagining how things could be. And so these different characters within myself, um, of course, both are a gift, but I've also had a lot of times when they're like clashing with each other because they have completely different needs and also different expectations. And the beauty of kind of naming them or using the idea of two different characters is that we get to see the play between them. We get to see where there's richness, and we get to see where the clash arises. And then we can integrate and we can enter a greater harmony. So we're operating in our best way. So we're operating, allowing that wild child and that elegant, structured adult to work together, to play together, to create together. And so when I say this has been a challenge for a long time, it came up more specifically when I began to run a business, because suddenly I didn't have an automatic structure that an employer provides. I didn't have a boss telling me these are the things you have to do. And so I had to create a lot of these things. And the mind beautifully knew how to do that, because that's one of my strengths, is organizing and planning and visioning, and even coming up with steps. But this inner child, that wild child, does not like that at all. It just doesn't. It it has energy where it suddenly rises, and then the energy dips, and then it suddenly shifts over here, and then it wants to play over there, right? And yet this child, the playful child, is the character, is the energy, is a frequency in which my best ideas have come forth. It's the energy with which I have created sometimes instant results in ways that I didn't expect. It's a way I can even lead my clients to come up with sudden solutions that, yesterday didn't even seem like they existed, and now they do, right? So I'm using child and adult because we have perceptions of what that is, the responsible adult and the misfit child, or whatever, whatever labels. We all have really different ones. And so when there's that difference in kind of in age, in this case, in maturity, in wisdom, we can put the child down and then try and say, okay, now we have to be the adult. We have to adult, it's become a verb these days. And it can feel so heavy um, and this idea of constant responsibility, this constant, how do I look to the world? Is everything perfect? And what am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? The critic, the judge is also part of often the adult because we have more experience in the world. And we've experienced also judgments within us and around us. And so for me, if I operate too much in that adult energy, it really begins to feel heavy and it really slows me down. I could spend weeks and months in that state if I wasn't catching myself and think I'm making progress. But what I've realized is when I go too much into that, I do not make progress. In fact, it halts my progress and it slows it down. Now, not everybody works like this, right? And so this video is for those of you who can relate to it so that you gain a better understanding and awareness and like me can begin to play with the two energies instead of have them battle against each other. And it may also be for those of you who know people like me, right? Who don't seem to follow that structure all the time, and you're like, I want to know how they work, but I just don't understand. And it may give you some empathy and compassion and also joy at knowing somebody who works in a very different way than you, because that can be complementary. And so I mentioned that this started really coming to my awareness when I began my business versus before. So before that period, of course, I'd been in school till I was like early 20s, right? And so that was very structured. And within that structure, I felt I was always very comfortable in school. I could relate to people so well, and I enjoyed being around so many different people. So, and I liked learning. So the structure ended up being quite supportive. Now, there were times, I think like in high school, I found it quite stifling. It wasn't, it wasn't built to the way that I learned best. And because I was older already, like, as a teenager, then a child, my hunger to learn was also stronger. My desire to engage was stronger, but I wasn't finding that experience in high school. But in university, it definitely showed up. And I created opportunities and found opportunities that would allow me to show up as I really was. But still, there was a lot of structure. Then I had a couple of jobs, and in those jobs, there was a certain amount of structure. Now, I was one of those people who actually was given a lot of independence in my first major job right off the bat. And I seemed to just like attract jobs like that, where I was in some kind of leadership role. So I was expected to just get on with it, right? And I did, and I loved it, and I flourished in that because, again, there was a structure around me, but within I got to play, I got to bring out my creativity, and so I felt supported by that structure. I also had good managers. And I always, when I speak to young people who are just starting their careers, I'm always like, well, if you're going to get a job, make sure you work with somebody, the boss has to be somebody that you get along with and is going to support you, because it's going to make a major difference in what you get to do or don't get to do. Anyway, so I had that experience. Then when I broke away from that, realized it wasn't gonna be my future, that's when suddenly I had all this freedom and no outside structure. So the structure now had to come from me. But if the structure was all coming from me, suddenly that wild child wasn't feeling free to play. Suddenly it was like, oh, now she has to listen to the adult. And because the adult now has to be in charge because nobody else is. Right? So back then I didn't use these characters. I didn't put them in that language, right? I just felt this tug of war inside of me, and it was always like, okay, let's get the work done so I can play, right? That was like my constant feeling. And when I say play, I'm talking about having free time where I can contemplate, I can reflect, I can imagine, I can feel and sense, where I tap into my intuition, where ideas come through me. And sometimes I create. And sometimes play can be play, like doing something that is completely unrelated to my work, and to renew myself, to feel nourished by that time. And so that challenge was there, and I would say continues to be, except the difference is I think I'm now like trying finally understanding it more because I've put it into these two descriptors which show me what is working for me. And that's what this is all about, is that finding our rhythm and finding the way we work best so the best of us can come through, right? It's not just some whatever descriptor to understand or self-analyze. It's really about how do I make the most of my days? What is a way that there can be a dance between these two? Because both are part of me and both pull me at different times. When I'm too much in the child and I get too much of the play, my mind kicks in and goes, wait a second, where's the structure? I need a bit of structure. Give me some direction here. What are we doing all this for? Right? And those questions come forth. And so knowing what I need to allow that childlike energy that in my case happens to be where a lot of the treasures come from, a lot of those brilliant brainstorms come from, the unexpected manifestations come from, when I'm in that light, playful mood of wonder, of joy, of wouldn't it be fun if this happened? And so knowing that you can't, isn't there a story about the golden goose or something like that? I don't remember the details, but as a child, it was a story about again, when you're trying to get that goose to lay more eggs, and then you ruin everything, right? Instead of like nourishing it, nurturing it, and allowing it to gift when it is time to gift, right? And so like allowing a rhythm to begin to show itself. So now, after a couple of decades of working in a business and doing many diverse services along the years, I can easily start tracking, and I can tell you, when that major thing happened, that major result showed up, this is what was happening around it. And whereas I can also say, the times that nothing seemed to happen, and remember when I was trying to work so hard and I was trying to follow all the rules that other people say that I'm supposed to, in marketing and in how I show up and all of that, things would not happen. I was not getting the results. And so there is a cost to not listening to our own rhythm, right? And it could literally be a financial cost, not just an emotional cost, not just an energy cost. All of it then, begins to multiply. And this is where stress and burnout happen as well. And people, these are also sometimes the people who are constantly taking courses, constantly learning, but they never actually take the risk of really diving into their business, of really claiming it and clearly offering it. And because it's like they want to stay in the innocence of the learning, the growth, but the real stark reality of people reacting or not reacting, they want to avoid. And so again, these are different parts of their personality. But when it comes to creating your vision, living your dreams, I don't know if there's any other way than diving into it and testing the water sometimes, but then also diving in and taking actions that may be bold, may be different, may be new, may easily fail, but may also succeed. Because the satisfaction I can tell you that I have received when one of my ideas works is so immense. And I don't know that, more predictable success could ever rival that. And I'm not saying that I want to live in this kind of up down all the time, but understanding my rhythm allows me to create with my rhythm, and also shows me that in my environment, I have to create a system and a way to be supported, to have structures, so that I'm not in a panic mode or this sudden flood of opportunity and income, and then sudden major long dry spells, right? Because I have experienced that. And of course there's things I've gained from it, as in I've learned how to manage myself, manage my cash flow, manage things so that I can still have a certain level of safety or security that allows me to keep functioning effectively. But there are times I tested that. I did test that, and I allowed myself to go past the boundaries that I was comfortable with, really as an experiment to see, okay, can I do this, right? And those were difficult times, or stressful times, because again, I think it was ended up being a stress that I created instead of a playful or inspired idea that was actually coming through, where I was fully aligned. And I mean, I've got several manifestation stories I could tell you right now as to how that could show up. But one of the things that, and again, I'll refer to the wild child, that it requires that I have joy, and it requires that I love what I love, and I'm doing things that I love, and it doesn't like to compromise. It doesn't work on compromise. It gets like suffocated through compromise. And so the question I ask myself when I get stuck is, what am I desiring? What am I really called to? What do I need right now? And it can be the tiniest of things, right? And so other times it can be more significant. In my last video, I think 2 weeks ago, I told you about how I treated myself to a lovely breakfast of French toast, and how good it was, how delicious it was, and it was just so amazing that it just made like my whole body just relaxed and enjoyed it fully. And like the rest of the day started to flow after I had had a couple of days of feeling really like a lot of friction. So it can be something as sweet as that, right? But it was like suddenly, instead of going, okay, these are all the things I want to do, and mentally going, oh, these are all the things I'd really love to do, because it was mental, I went into my body and it was like, oh, yes, let's just have some delicious breakfast. Not what my mind thinks is going to be healthy today or the energy I need, but something that I just want to enjoy. And that created the shift, because it was like suddenly I became present, right? That's what joy and love are. You can't have joy and love and not be present in yourself, right? Those are energies that are embodied energies. And so that's what I'm referring to here. That wild child, right? The one that wants to play. It is nourished by that. Another example I can give you was I had an event. This was many years ago now. I don't know, I might have talked about it in one of the videos already, but the lesson in it is still like very alive and relevant to what I'm sharing here. And so I had this event to go to, like a conference, you can call it, and it was going to be in Paris. And at the time, it's not like I had the cash sitting there to make this trip. So that was the first question was, oh my gosh, I have to come up with this, and if I really want to go. And I began to really like look in and go, okay, what's going on here, right? Um, is it just about making the cash, bringing in the cash in order to do it? And I realized I wasn't motivated at all to go, which completely shocked me. But it was just like I just was not interested. The conference itself was not enough, and it was part of a program I was in, and so it was expected, and yet normally like that would kind of thing would just completely light me up. But in that case, there were a couple of reasons looking back that I know now why the conference didn't excite me, because I really didn't actually, I think by that time I didn't feel that the program was of the value that I thought it was going to be. So there was nothing inside of me that felt like, oh, this is going to be a major loss if I don't go. And yet I didn't want to just give up. I just didn't want to give up. So I tapped in a little deeper and I asked myself, okay, so if it's not the conference, if you could take it or leave it, what would have you go there? And then suddenly I thought about Paris, and I thought about, I'd been there before and a few times, and I thought about the Champs-Elysees and walking along that. I thought of someone close to me who lives there, and wouldn't it be great to visit? And then I thought, maybe I could pop over to London and spend a few days there. And suddenly, I'm getting excited. Suddenly, there's a purpose way beyond the conference. And that purpose is actually lights me up. It's making me happy. I can feel it. Like I can feel myself walking down the Champs-Elysees. I can feel myself meeting with people close to me. I can suddenly imagine taking the Eurostar from Paris to London. And like all of a sudden, I'm living in that energy. And I got lit up. And at that moment, it wasn't like I have to make this happen. It was like, oh, what can I do? And like 3 ideas just came forth. And at that point, I did a webinar. I remember there was a first webinar that I had done, and I recorded. It was like an hour long, and I was really happy with it. And you know what? I think I only had about 5 people who listened to it initially, like 5, right? And yet, because of that webinar, I gained 2 clients. So that's an example about that child, that wild child who gets lit up and is like, yes, I'm on fire, I want to do this, and just puts it out there bravely without thought of metrics or scaling or all that stuff that we're told to focus on. And so right away I got 2 new clients within that week, which was super exciting because that alone was exciting. I love working with my clients. I also did what did I do? Oh, I decided to allow like somebody else to come and stay at my place, and rented it out briefly, which that I had never done before. And I just, again, I felt excited about it. It wasn't like, oh, let me do this in order to gain the money so I can do something. No, it wasn't in that energy. It was just like, oh my God, that would be so fun, right? Like, let's try that. And it's not something that I would do all the time. I certainly didn't do it on my recent trip, but on that occasion, it just felt like one of those ideas where I was lit up. And then, so that's number 2. Like already now the funds are taken care of. That's all fantastic. And on top of it, I ended up getting a place to stay in London. Sorry, not in London, in Paris. Like, somebody's friend was going to be away, and they're like, oh, why don't you come in? You're more than welcome to stay there for a week. So I ended up having my own apartment in Paris for a week. So this is an example of if I had done it the the grind way, the difficult way, where suddenly I'm like pumping out all this work. I would have been exhausted. My heart's not into it. Probably wouldn't have gotten anything out of it. Because it just doesn't typically work for me. That's what I find, right? Like if it works for you, if you've got a system and you do the work and that cause and effect thing works for you, I'm not telling you to stop by any means, right? Like if it was working for me, I'd probably do it too. But I believe that sometimes in our life, and especially if we're into growth and we're into consciousness and all that, we come across times when suddenly regular things just don't work anymore. The 3D approach of work hard and then you get the results stops working. And it doesn't stop working because there's something wrong with it. It stops working because there is something beyond it that we are now tapping into, that we are now evolved into. And it's a very different way of being, I can tell you. And yet, every time, whether I hear somebody else talk about it, I experience it, or I read about it, it's like, yes, 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 right? Like it completely reflects the experience I'm having. And yet, because I've been programmed and conditioned, like just about everybody else, into that, you got to do this in order to get that, it's so easy for me to keep defaulting into that. And I have to kind of reprogram myself, or, shift and just, or let those things go and then return to that inspired energy. And it's easy again for me to try and do that from the mind. Oh, okay, what can I do to be inspired now? Right? Which has nothing to do with inspiration. Versus going, what am I called to now? What am I called to now? Maybe I, want French toast for breakfast. Maybe I want to take a walk. Maybe I want to plan a weekend away. Maybe I'm ready to start a podcast. Maybe I want to reach out to some of my past clients and see what they're up to. Maybe I want to create a new product, right? And that present moment is where the energy is current, right? Like a current, think of a currency as well, currency money, right? It's real, it's now, it's present, energy. And so I've learned that when I'm playing with that wild child and I'm allowing space in my days to have her do what she needs or is called to, then there are natural times I move into the adult. And sometimes I move into the adult just because it makes me feel good. It makes me feel good to sit there and write a list or kind of map out, okay, like if I have like 5 areas of life in my mind that's suddenly like, oh my God, I have to tend to all of this. And then I write them out and I organize them on paper. Sometimes even just doing that gives me so much peace. And I've learned not to take that diagram or that list and then follow it step by step, because as soon as I do that, I'm back into that program. And then I lose touch with the spirit, with the energy, with the frequency that's alive, with that current. And this alternating rhythm feeds me and expands what's possible. And something I said earlier, by the way, that I didn't finish was that, if you're somebody who works kind of either on project basis or, again, has these bursts and then sometimes these dry spells and it's all like that, it's very helpful to create an ecosystem, a word I used, I don't know, it's been a couple of months in some of those videos that I began talking about that will support you financially and structurally so that you're not going into panic mode. So so you can, rather than going, oh my God, there is a dry spell, what do I do to get out of it? You just like, oh, I can relax because this is a resting phase where there is something maybe deeper going on underneath the surface from which a new idea is going to suddenly bloom. And I want to be ready and awake to that, right? And in the past, what I tried to do was, it was like, oh, I have to make all of this income in order to have that kind of safety net, in order to take care of certain things, in order to blah, 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 right? And it wasn't working. It just didn't work. If it had, I would have kept on with it, but it wasn't working. And yet, what worked was completely back to what I keep saying in this video, is that when I moved into that, the wild child who's like, okay, what would I love? Like, and I began like imagining, oh yeah, wouldn't it be great if I had this money to, if I was mortgage free, for example, if I had this kind of cash flow so that my monthly expenses were covered, so I could so I could be creative when the creativity rises. Like when I started moving into that state and allowing myself to feel the joy of like just wanting that and not thinking about how am I going to make it happen, not trying to do anything, not expecting it. I was just really going, okay, what would be nourishing for me right now, for this rhythm that really allows me to thrive. Those prayers got answered. They got answered in a way that I didn't have a reason to expect would happen in that way. And so suddenly resources showed up, opportunities showed up, and that created a sense of what I thought I would be working to make happen all those years, right? And yet the working toward to make it happen wasn't making it happen. But the delight in the having of what I wanted to create brought it into being. And, so many teachers will talk about this, right? Lester Levinson from the Sedona method, or release technique, talks about the state of having, not wanting. And that's a big difference. Most of us live in the state of wanting instead of the state of having. So in those moments, I moved into having. When I thought about being in Paris and what I could experience and enjoy, what I actually wanted to experience and enjoy, I moved into the state of having. When I thought about having a more financially flowing life and where I had more support, like truly of a desire, like an end, that's the end result, it came to be. Neville Goddard talks about this as well, right? It's done, the state of it's done. Dr. Joe Dispenza, meditating into the scenes of where it's done, where you receive. Once you enter this state, this awareness, the usual 3D mechanisms, in my experience, stop working, and it's not to sabotage us. It's actually because we've moved into operating more like in a 5D way. We've moved into a different state. And there's no use trying to like go backwards and down into what we were, but we have to we keep evolving. And so now the interesting thing is the more I relax and allow the spaciousness, play with that wild child, move into structure, and again, allow a dance, the more things work. And I look forward to a time when there's less of that battle. And it's definitely less than it used to be a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. It's definitely like I've gone more and more that way, and it's just opened more as a result. And now I know that is by honoring the different parts, allowing them to exist harmoniously within me, not criticizing one, putting another one down, but actually saying, wow, they both have their strengths. And what is a way that I can ensure that they get to they get to thrive in that strength? And then I move from, if we're talking about finances, instead of cash flow being about the grind, about the hustle, it becomes about rhythm, becomes about the lifestyle, the ecosystem I'm creating around me. And that I'm occupying a certain state that allows that to be, where that it becomes my norm. And thing is, when I do that, I can't predict how that's going to come. Whether that's going to come through my work, whether that's going to come from investments, whether it's going to come as a gift, as an opportunity, as a download of an idea that suddenly I think, oh my goodness, this is going to be amazing. I can put this out to the world and get a result from it, right? Who knows? Sometimes it's experiences that we're given by other people, right? People we know, or sometimes complete strangers, right? There's tons of stories out there. So this video, as I wrap things up now, is really to share again what I've had to kind of come to terms with, these different elements of myself and how I thrive. And there's something that is not easy for me to share or explain with people who tend to be much more linear and logical. And I know plenty of those people. I have plenty of those people in my life. And so when they hear me talk like this, they're just like, oh, you're living in some fantasy land. This is not how it works. Like, there are probably reasons why everything worked the way you think it was some kind of miracle or manifestation, but we can probably trace it back. But of course, you can always trace things back, and we can make a little story around it. Same as the linear stuff. We make the story around it. And so I'm not here to convince anybody that this works. I am just saying, I have learned this, and I've learned it through trial and error, and I've learned it through experience, and it's been quite amazing. And I'm continuing to learn it and continuing to practice it. And now my intention is to honor it more and more. And when we honor our true self in the way we happen to be designed, we get the benefits of it, right? And we get to share it with the world. And I know there's millions and millions of people out there who do resonate with this. There's already millions of videos on YouTube talking about, this kind of stuff. And so if that's who you are, I want you to just give yourself space and time to begin to honor your rhythm and see what really works, right? If what helps me is using my mind sometimes and going, okay, remember when I got that trip to Paris? What did I do, right? When did that result? Oh, remember when I got that major opportunity? What happened, right? What state was I in? And I know that looks like the cause and effect, but what I'm really looking for is a reminder, the evidence that something else was going on. I was not in a work hard state, because for me, when I do that too much, not as inspiration, not as, oh my goodness, I'm so excited about this new project, I can't help but work on it, right? That's a different energy. That can look like I'm working hard as well, but it doesn't feel like I'm working hard, right? But when it feels like I'm working hard, when I'm pushing, for me, the results do not come. So look at that within yourself. Discover that about yourself. And honestly, sometimes it's so much easier for someone outside of you to see it as you tell your stories, and they'll be able to go, yes, yes, yes. Like, do you see the pattern now? Do you see the way things are working? Use it, for your advantage. So I'd love to hear any comments or questions, and I can do further videos because this is a topic that is expansive and there's lots of elements to it. But the essence is in a way simple. How do we thrive? How are you thriving? Do more of that. Do more of that. And keep expanding the container so you can experience more of that as well. So have a fabulous day. Let me know what part of this video spoke to you the most. And if you activate it in some way in the coming weeks, months, then write about it. And, we can see more and more stories of how we can live in our rhythms and have greater harmony within, which will manifest and create around us. So thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.